Building bridges with the G7, lesson learned from the Urban 7 cooperation on ambitious climate action in Japan, Europe, and the USA. So my name is Wolfgang Teubner. I'm the regional director of ICLE in Europe, and it's my honor and pleasure to moderate this panel. Unfortunately, we will have to start with a reduced panel for the time because, as some of you might have experienced, we face a few logistical challenges today and people are getting stuck on their way to this session. So for the time being, I would like to welcome next to me the mayor of Turku, Mina Arve, who is also the vice president of ICLE and has also actively participated in the multi-level governance roundtables that were organized under the G7 by the Japanese government. And next to Mina, His Excellency Francesco Covaro. He's the special envoy on climate for the Italian government. So to just give a brief introduction, why are we here? Since 2021, cities and local governments have started to get engaged with the G7 countries under the Urban 7. So the Urban 7 partners are the national associations of local governments from the G7 countries. And the Secretariat is operated by ICLE and the Global Parliament of Mayors to support this partnership. We were starting off under the UK presidency, and then the German presidency was very much supportive to really involve local governments, particularly in the urban development ministers process. And we were also then invited to have a seat at a table, and usually we are represented by a representative from the National Association of the host country in the ministerial meeting. Under the Japanese presidency, we also managed to develop an impact and a partnership with the climate and energy and environment track. So this also then resulted in the idea to have multi-level governance roundtables between the ministries and also involving representative from Urban 7, but also from partners like UN Habitat, that is represented here, and OECD. So we are, of course, trying to enhance this partnership also in light of the process that we see happening here, that, of course, local governments are getting more and more important to implement the goals of the Paris Agreement. And I think to be able to successfully manage that, we need a close dialogue between local governments and upper levels of government to be able to accelerate the transformation on the local level. So I would like to start off with Mayor Arve. Mayor Arve, you're part of many, of course, international activities, but also you're a city that is deeply involved in the European mission for climate neutral cities. And of course, also the mission brings about a number of challenges, I would say. And you have also in the multi-level governance space, and you have been part of the multi-level governance roundtable. So what is your perspective on this from the local level, and what would potentially be your expectations also to the process?
Thank you, Wolfgang. Let's see if I'm not, yeah. Hello, everyone. It's good to be here. I'm really proud to have being able to discuss with you about these important matters. So I'm coming from Turku in Finland, which is one of the mid-sized cities in Europe, located in the southwestern coast of Finland, being at the same time the vice president of ICLE. I have a couple of points of view for this discussion, but before that, I would like to say that everything that we do in cities and in local levels has a strong impact, not only locally, but nationally and globally as well. And that's why I think it's so important to have this active discussion with the national governments also and multi-level cooperation, because that is kind of impact. It's not always visible to understand before you discuss with the local leaders, having the on the same table discussing on the local levels with the business leaders, with the residents, with all the other organizations, and just giving a short example of shipyard in Turku, which is making the biggest and greatest cruisers in the world in Maija shipyard in Turku. And what they are doing, we all know that the cruiser business is not the most sustainable way of consuming free time, but that's why they are closely working with the Finnish government and we as a city to make those cruisers to be carbon neutral. And they aim to have the first carbon neutral cruisers to be sailing on the world seas on 2030. And that's kind of impact that they have a local level. We can support them in their shipyard. We can support them in the local level. The national government can support them with the R&D financing, and then they have the impact globally while they are actually sailing all over the world with their cruisers in the future in those carbon neutral cruisers. So there's many levels where you actually can combine this practical impact in different levels. But coming to this discussion, 3 points. It's about European Union and emissions and cities. It's about green financing, and then it's about the middle-sized cities, which actually half of the cities in the world basically are the middle-sized cities. So it's not only mega cities that have impact, but mid-sized cities are very important as well. Being part of the European 100 Smart and Climate Neutral Cities mission is supporting our work that we are doing in Turku. We are going to be carbon neutral by 2029, so 1 year earlier than the other cities in the mission, and that's been supporting for our work in quite a lot. And we have been working with our local stakeholders as well. So we are working closely with the residents, NGOs, businesses, civic society in general. So we also we had our local stocktake event in the beginning of November, and we have been reporting it together with ICLEI and other cities, like the 30 other cities in the world now for this COP28. So there is a very important thing that you have this kind of inspiring and cooperating networks where you can show your example and then do practical issues. My second point is about green financing. We all know that money matters. You need it anyway in many ways, and we have been developing a concept called climate budgeting. We as a city, we are anyway investing quite a lot. We are investing to our schools, in our service network. We are investing to the housing, the affordable housing. So when you know what you are investing, it's very important to do it in advance, to calculate it, that it will be support the green transition. And we have been calculating against European Union taxation about our investment budget, which is about 1.5 billion euros in 4 years' time. And 1.3 billion euros of that is actually supporting green transition in our city. And that's something that we would be doing anyway. But we are doing it smartly and wisely, so we take also into consideration this taxonomy. And this is my advice to everyone, that you anyway are doing a lot of things, do it wisely. Third point about mid-sized cities is this discussion about national and international decision-making processes. And when we are talking about importance of recognizing the role of subnational governments, we also need to talk about mid-sized cities, not only mega cities. And there's quite often quite easy and low-level discussion with different stakeholders in mid-sized cities. You have your residents quite close, you have your businesses on the same table discussing other organizations on the region, and there you get a very well and good impact in everything what you do with quite low-level efforts. And that's why we need to gather all these mid-sized cities in networks, like within ICLEI and other networks, to work closely with the local governments and discuss what we could do there. And we have a local newspaper in Turku, which is having the slogan called "Life is Local." And that's what it is actually, that we are doing the local level actions, and that the impact is in local level, even though we would be discussing with the different levels and multinational levels in this regard. So you were asking what's my suggestion or my waitings for the future. So is to continue to work closely together with the G7 countries, together with the cities, and there we would have really much more impact, aligning our ambitions and ability to actually implement those actions and goals that we have, and that we can do in city level better. And I would really like to thank Japanese government and all the other G7 presidents countries who have been having this leadership and understanding what is the meaning of the cities and local level governments, because that's a huge impact. And if we are not working together, we could not reach that much that we could now reach. And I'm really happy to have the Italian Climate Envy here and supporting them to continue this active work with G7 countries and working together with cities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Awe. So I would like to introduce my next panelist, which is Mayor Barbara Buffalo from Columbia in Missouri, from the United States, who finally made it. So I hope you have regained your breath and are able to contribute. Well, I mean, I think in the United States, I think we have foreseen with the administration and the Inflation Reduction Act that, you know, there is a lot of activity triggered, I would say, also on the local level. And I think this is a particularly interesting space to watch for us, how this, you know, investments basically are made possible on the local level, how this is sort of working in the multi-level governance space. Maybe you can enlighten us a bit on that.
Well, thank you. And thank you for the patience. And I apologize for the glow that I have on me right now. So I'm the mayor of Columbia, Missouri, which is in the middle of the country. And often when we talk about how these investments work, it really takes the collaboration that is there. In the United States, we've struggled sometimes with the dips in investments, which then kind of trigger our markets to not investing in clean energy and the transformation that we need to see. Where we've seen the uptake, though, in the support is when the networks of communities come together. So similar to in Europe, where you have, you know, the covenant of cities and covenant of mayors, you know, we have different networks within, like U.S. Conference of Mayors, Climate Mayors, also looking within at the city level for like Urban Sustainability Directors Network. And those networks are able to continue the framework that help us get action done in the U.S., regardless of what kind of happens at our national level. I did want to say, you know, for one of it, they also help advocate for the investments that are needed in our communities. So in Missouri, while we might have investments coming from our federal government, it sometimes takes a long time for those to be put in place where we are locally. And so right now with the Inflation Reduction Act and others, we're seeing that kind of ramp up, which is helping us a lot. We're not a coastal city, so people don't often talk about climate change in the Midwest, except for now we are experiencing that. And so seeing some of these investments for our resiliency is helping us a lot. One thing I appreciate, Mayor, when you said about the local level, and where we see is local is where we have the biggest impact to get momentum going. So I have a saying, your newspaper has one, but I have a different one. Mine is love where you live and serve where you love. And because we know that local action is where you see more momentum happening, then we can hopefully activate at a federal level. So I don't know if I answered your question, but if there's more you want me to do, I can.
I will certainly come back to you for sure. Well, as we are missing the current presidency, we will immediately look into the future presidency of G7. So, Mr. Ambassador, what can we expect for the Urban Seven and the collaboration under the Italian presidency to make things work better?
So, first of all, thanks for the invitation. It's my pleasure to stay here. So, you know, Italy. Italy is strongly involved in this discussion about municipality, city, and the local level because each small town in Italy, I say a lot of time, is like a state. So, for us, it's important to have a good dialogue with our local government. Is the base for us. So we want to maintain this kind of discussion. And to give you an example, what we are doing right now in Italy, finally we was able to start with the renewable communities. So we decided to prepare a plan for our small city because in Italy we have some big cities, but the measure of them are very small, to improve the use of renewable energy with a specific law that give us the possibility, for example, to share energy among different buildings. For example, think that some small reality has 10 different buildings. One is the school, another one is the hospital, another one is the site where there is the mayor and so on. And they have the possibility to implement and to create their own photovoltaic system, for example, in a specific building, and to share the energy among other people or with the same building of the school and the hospital. And this is important, for example, in Italy, because we have a lot of artworks. Sometimes it's difficult to create, to install photovoltaic system on an historical building. For this reason, we created, this is only an example, obviously, but I would like to put in evidence how much is important for Italy to involve in this discussion our communities and local communities. First of all, because we have a lot of this experience. Then also another important aspect connected with our local government is the adaptation solution. You saw that Italy started to see the problem of climate change with floods and some of these bad situations. We have also earthquake that is not connected with climate change, but is another issue that we have to fight. And so there is a strong connection between the central government with the municipalities and the small cities. For this reason, this will be an important aspect that my government want to put in the G7 agenda to bring solution, but more to demonstrate how it is possible to collaborate between an high-level government and the lower one. And this is extremely important because, as you see, the recent report said us that cities are responsible for 80% of global emission. There are a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do in this direction. We have the solution, we have the possibility to do this. The first important problem, the first important element is to create the good dialogue among the parties. These two sometimes is difficult. Fortunately, in this case, Italy has an advantage, if you want, because we have a lot of different realities. One town with 1,000 of inhabitants is completely different with the close town. So it is extremely important to find solution and to create the dialogue. This community is only an example that we decided to use in this direction. But starting from the result of the COP, we are preparing an agenda, an item connected with the relationship between state and local governments. That for us is extremely important.
Thank you. Very encouraging. So we're looking forward to collaborate, of course, and to develop the agenda further. So now we have more or less finally completed our panels step by step. So so let me go back to the city level for a moment. So I would like to welcome Jonas Kamle from the city of Malmö, who is friendly to step in for the mayor, who is still stuck. He's responsible for the climate work of the city of Malmö. So Jonas, I mean, also from your perspective, I mean, on the multi-level governance space, and also I think with you have a bit of a global, I think, also perspective from the city of Malmö, as we have also learned through our World Congress in Malmö. So maybe you can give us a bit your point of view on the multi-level governance space, but also on the G7 in the world, maybe.
All right. So does it work? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1. Testing, testing. Can anyone hear me? No? All right, excellent. So sorry about that. That was a big ask. I'll do my best. So I think speaking them from a very Swedish kind of context and a European context. So let me start there. So let me start in Malmö. So I think it's reasonable to expect cities to have political leadership. Our political leadership is that we should be climate neutral by 2030. It should be an inclusive and equitable climate transition that we're making in Malmö. And rightly done, it should create more green jobs. It should improve the well-being for our citizens, our children, and so forth. So that's kind of the setting. So we have the SDG as a backdrop from Malmö, and Malmö was one of the first cities globally to adopt the SDGs as our goals as well. So that's kind of setting the scene, the local leadership. And what we can do is that we can mobilize horizontally. We can mobilize the businesses, the academia, the infrastructure owners, the citizens, and our own organization, of course. What we can't do locally is we can't mobilize vertically. And so we can't mobilize regionally and nationally and European and globally. And that integration between the different layers, what we do in the cities and the space that we have, and the mayor from spoke earlier before about how much of the influence of the sphere of influence does the city have. And I think the number was something around 50% that you mentioned. It's something similar in Malmö's case. And I think that's very important to recognize the difference between what we can do and what we can shoulder responsibility for and what others needs to do. So if you take then the policy piece that's very important here is that Fit for 55 is a great policy initiative if you look at it from a European perspective, and especially then connected with the taxonomy and so forth. But what we need to understand is what kind of impact will that have? What kind of conditions does these kind of policy packages actually create on the ground for cities to operate in? So we have the European mission, 2 missions actually that are very interesting here. We have the 1 mission for the climate neutral cities by 2030, but we also have the mission connected to resilience, which is equally important because we need to do both at the same time. And I know you spoke about that earlier before as well. So we have 2 missions, and then when you set these kind of goals and you start to streamline all these people together to do something, you also need to take the responsibility of actually ensuring that the policy packages that you're putting forward will actually bridge the gap between where we are and where we want to be in 2030. And I think that's in that kind of space, and together with ICLEI, we then had that conversation about the Malmö commitment. How do we actually then make sure that this is an inclusive process when we're moving forward? How do we make sure that when we're retrofitting, when we're working with the existing city, because remember, new build will only be a few percentages by 2030, which is the point that we should be climate neutral. So it's in the existing city, predominantly this change will happen. And then we need to understand how do we make this an inclusive? And that's where ICLEI's leadership, together with them, with the mayor, said, well, let's find out something new. Let's test something new. And that was kind of the setting for the Malmö commitment that we then set into place. And so I think from that kind of perspective, I think that what I'm expecting, or what Malmö then would be expecting when it comes to leadership, is that most of the climate action will actually happen on the grounds in cities or regions. And I think that's very important to recognize. The speaker before mentioned that about 50% of the emissions will either take place directly or through the scope 3 emissions take place in cities. And I think the number is actually a little bit higher than that by 2050. I think the estimate is around 70 to 85% even. So the cities are kind of the focal point for this transformation. And then that means that what we need to do is we need to find out new ways of working together between the local government and the national government. I think that's especially important. In Sweden, we are trying something new. We've built a network of cities called Viable Cities, which is then 23 Swedish cities that are banded together and said, we all want to be climate neutral by 2030. That's 40% of the Swedish population are encompassed by these cities. And what we have here is a unique national climate contract where the cities together with national authorities and the government say, well, this is something we're going to do together. And I think these kind of mechanisms is what you need to put in place, mechanisms that actually look at, all right, so what needs to be done and who's actually responsible for what. And I think that's something that you can scale and it can be replicated. I know the Spanish cities are building a similar network. I know that Austria is also looking at building something similar. And I'm sure there's lots of other examples that I don't know of, but I think it's one of these examples that can be brought to scale.
Thank you, Jonas. Last but definitely not least, we have our speaker from Japan, which is Mr. Katsuhiko Takemoto. He's the chair of ICLEI Japan, but he's also the vice chair of the International Institute for Applied Sciences of the council there. And he has also ministerial history as the vice minister for environment. So, I mean, it's a bit strange, of course, after everybody has going to look back at the current presidency, which is still active. But I think Japan moved a lot forward in the combination of the urban development agenda and the climate agenda, and also, of course, in the multi-level governance discussion. So what is your perspective when you look back at the presidency, and also, you know, how would you potentially have a vision on the way forward under the G7?
Thank you. Thank you, Wolfgang, for your kind introduction. Sorry to be late due to my previous commitment. However, I am very happy to be here, and thank you for inviting me into this very important event. On behalf of ICLEI Japan, I am very happy to share with you what's going on, and as Wolfgang shared, what perspective we have toward the future. In terms of G7 presidency, this year we organized the U7 Mayors Summit, that is the Urban 7 Mayors Summit, following the German initiative to launch the Urban 7 initiative. And we organized last March, we had the Mayors Summit. At the conclusion of the dynamic high-level discussions, we have made the outcome U7 Mayors Declaration, and which has been disseminated to the international community. At the same time, this declaration has been submitted to the government officials, relevant government ministries who are going to the host of the G7 ministerial meeting, environment, climate, and energy at the same time, environment ministers meeting on the urban development. And the contribution has been reflected. And then in April in Japan, G7 Climate, Energy, and Environment Ministerial meeting was held by inviting representative of U7, the Mayor Summit. In that the context, our discussion at the U7 has been incorporated into the discussions at the ministerial level. This is, as the mayor said, the government and the local government, the cooperation or interface has been realized, I hope. This is the very important aspect. Then in April ministerial level meeting, they have agreed on establishment of new initiative on G7 roundtable by inviting U7 representative around the world, including Italy, the EU, as well as the US as well. Then finally, they have concluded the very importance of the role of local government in developing the policies on climate, energy, as well as the environment. At the same time, government recognize the kind of importance to cooperate each other. In this regard, the final outcome of the G7 roundtable, actually, which was held in October, the final outcome, it is very important. I'm very happy to share with you. During this COP28, the final report has been shared in this COP28 tomorrow afternoon, and Japan, government of Japan, together with us, they are going to deliver the final outcome. But this is not final. This is the kind of a starting point, since the G7 roundtable was the first trial. And of course, in the context of the G7 process, at the same time, we are going to move forward based on the discussions at the round table. Round table, once again, role of the local government initiative in addressing climate change and other environment issues, together with government. Government recognize their leadership together with the local government. At the same time, international cooperation, that is the another subject. We are very much looking forward to further development our discussion together with here on the mayors and the leaders around the world to move forward. At the same time, this subject, multi-level governance of the initiative, that is the big challenge, how we can contribute to mainstream this governance into the main discussions in the global discussions, such as the among ourselves, G7 countries, not only G7, G20, at the same time international, worldwide, through the discussion COP28 and beyond. This is what I wish to to share with you. Japan is committed itself to continuing our effort in this regard. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, thank you. We're pleased to hear that, of course. Thank you very much. So, if we dig a bit deeper and we look forward, I mean, to next year, and you know, going back to the mayors. So, yeah, what would you like to, or what would you potentially recommend to also in the Urban 7? Which topics would you see as potentially the key topics that we should bring forward, you know, from the Urban 7 to the ministerial level?
Yes, thanks for the question. There's a couple of points. First of all, very, very important thing is to include our citizens to be in that discussion together with us. And we can be the voice as the mayor, the voice of the citizens, because if, as Jonas told here earlier, I was in the morning telling that in Turku, for instance, we have 50% that we can affect on our as a city organization to the emissions on the area, and we need the residents and businesses and other organizations to do the other half of the work. So they need to also be committed to the work, and we have to recognize that sometimes we are speaking in a quite difficult language with our residents about the emissions and reducing. It's quite abstract. It's much more easier to talk to them when it's about cleaner air. It's about everyday organizing. Is it easy to walk to the daycare or the school for the kids? So it's very, very normal everyday life things that you actually should be talking to them in order to get the support, because you need the political support, and it comes from the residents in the end of the day. So first of all, we need to have our residents really deeply encouraged and in committed into the work, and we can be the voice for them in that multi-level discussion where we are having together. Secondly, not only discussing about reducing the emissions, but understanding that it's the wholeness that we are really talking about. It's the reducing the emissions, but it's about the global and globe as a biodiversity, as a nature, that we really have to understand what's the connection between the biodiversity, our nature, and climate actions, actually, what we need to do, and the climate, the change, what the climate change is actually affecting. And thirdly, how we actually do all this together and change our economy towards the circular economy. And that's where we actually have all these combined. And that's what I keep telling everywhere and every time, that I'm sorry to disappoint if you have been thinking about only the reduction of the emissions and you are going further with that one, but that's not enough. We need the biodiversity, the nature thinking, we need the circular economy thinking. And just to conclude, I want to thank you, Mr. Takamoto, personally having this great leadership in this process together with the G7, U7 network and multi-level governance. It's been great to see that.
Thank you. Kind of similar question, of course, to you,
Okay.
because
thank you.
I think you're ahead.
Yeah.
So, Mayor Bakalov, what is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I appreciate the bringing in the citizens, and I'd opened it up also to the opportunities. So first, if I had to advocate to my higher ups, it'd be to continue the investment in local action that we're seeing. So the investment in our local infrastructure for clean energy, energy efficiency, and resiliency. But then, as far as it goes across borders, one of the things that I saw, I was recently on a trip to China and got to see some of the work that they're doing about clean energy and the combined heat and power and all of these different new technologies for energy, not necessarily new, but maybe new to where I am. And I think I can see this. It's great for me to see this, but I need my utility employees to be seeing this. I need, the average person working in my electrical plant to see these as ways that they could start advocating for transitions back home. And so I think the idea of the subnational exchanges and workforce development that we can do that will help us really advance a lot of the technology that we need to see implemented. I have very passionate youth who are interested in making a change. I have leaders that want to see the change happen, but it's that in between that I need. And I think building those relationships across the borders will help us a lot to achieving that, because then they'll see these possibilities and then they'll support and we'll invest in it. Pretend mayor.
Okay.
Jonas, anything to add?
Absolutely. I think I'll tie into what you spoke about. I think the European mission was, it's a little bit funny because it's not mentioned a lot. Usually it ends with 100 climate neutral cities. If you're lucky, you'll get 100 climate neutral and smart cities. And if you're really lucky, then you actually know what the end of this is, by and for the citizens. And I think that's something that's a little bit overlooked. And I really tie into that. This is a mission, building climate neutral cities is by and for the citizens. So I think that's super important. And I think that was really smart to raise that. So I think that's, how do we have a citizen-centric conversation? And I think then tying into that, I completely agree with what was said about we can not only talk about the climate transition, this is a societal transformation that we're working on. And we also especially need to tie in as a backdrop the SDGs, but ecosystem services, and also to when we're doing climate mitigation, climate adaptation measures at the same time, they can be supporting each other if we do them in the right way. And I think thirdly, I think what I would like to see more of then is the policy integration perspective. So if we have a mutual goal, we want to have climate neutral cities by 2030, at least in a European setting, then we need to understand how far will our current set of policies take us. That's not something that we own at a local level. It's owned by national or European legislative bodies, and they need to hold that for us, because it's a question of standards. It's about policies that needs to be put in play that actually creates the conditions. the conditions for a more circular economy. The taxonomy is one of these examples. If the taxonomy points in the right direction, the right investments will be made. If it points in the wrong direction, the wrong kind of investments will be made. And that will have an impact at the local work. And so policy hubs at European level and at national level, I think, is a must, because we need to know. We can't guess anymore. It's 7 years left, and we can't end up guessing if it's going to be enough or not. We need to know if it's going to be enough, and then we need to understand if it's not, what additional measures can we put in play. I think that would be my final thing.
Okay, then I would like to bring that back to the forthcoming presidency and see also. I mean, I think there's a lot now coming also up on the integration side, and of course between the urban development agenda and of course the climate and environment agenda, I think, which anyway falls into your remit. So the question is,
thanks very much.
how we
And
can-
I agree very much with you that it is important to speak about with our citizens. It is important to explain why we are speaking about climate change. This is something that is difficult sometimes because, as you say, it's not only a problem of gas emission. This is one aspect. So, you know, I am not a politician. I am not. I am a scientist. So normally I stayed in the other side. I wrote paper where I try to explain that we have this problem, the problem of 1.5 degree. But as I told a lot of time, we are not saying that the world is an end. No, the world is changing, and this can create a lot of problem in our cities, in our towns. For this, so in the center of this discussion is our life. Nature is important, obviously, but in this case is our house. I made a lot of time this example. Think about Chernobyl. You know that Chernobyl was a disaster, but nature was there, is there now. Human, some problems to enter. So in some way, Earth is able to find a new equilibrium. The problem is that we would like to make part, to maintain this equilibrium and to stay inside. So first of all, communication and education. And another important aspect that I want to introduce with the local government agenda, calling this way in the G7, I wanted to improve in our cities the younger generation, to involve them in this discussion, because I know that they have the passion in this field and they have the capabilities to produce new technology and to have new ideas. In Italy, we invented this event that is called Youth for Climate, and we received a lot of real good projects from our younger generation around the world. And this is another important aspect that in my opinion, must be underlined. It's not only to speak about emission, as you saw. It's time to improve the discussion, to enlarge our view, because the only thing, we have a lot of technology, a lot of solution. I know very well this. The only thing that we don't have is time.
Thank you. Coming briefly back to the Japanese presidency. I mean, on the urban development agenda, we also saw, of course, the topic of digitalization, smart. I mean, we talked a lot here about smart, which means also, of course, using technology, but also digital tools in a good way, basically to support our agenda, and also, of course, resilience. So, I mean, my question is a bit, what is, particularly the perspective also on this smart side, and how we can bring this into our discussion.
Good. Thank you. Very important point. And again, this is the very important to encourage or include the insight from citizens themselves. Of course, as the leader of local government, have faced the challenging to persuade or the communication to get their support from citizens. At the same time, I think we can learn the knowledge or the day-to-day, through day-to-day life, we can find out what is the challenge and what is the solution toward the next phase. In particular, in my understanding, local government has a unique position because they are in the position to encourage local, private sectors, as well as the civil societies, to develop their own policies and activities. In this regard, the Japanese local government has learned through the ICRE network, having some lessons or advanced activities or experience. In particular, also I appreciate Mina's contribution to support our local government, the officials who would like to get a lot of advantage to move forward in this regard. And last point, the government and the local government, the interlinkage is also very important. And the interface and the local government, government interface with local government has a lot of creating the good solutions in the future. And the government is in the position to support the local government with the financial and the technical support. At the same time, the local government can contribute to the government based on their experience in the field basis. A lot of the creative knowledge and sort of the experience to be enhanced or shared through that mechanism. Once again, this multi-level governance is really important. And again, toward the future, I am very much encouraged, being encouraged through today's panel, and our kind of the intention to continue our momentum and to keep and enhance our momentum in this regard through this discussion, at the same time through the COP28 discussion and beyond. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So almost very nice concluding words. But just maybe one aspect that I would briefly touch upon before we close. I mean, with the G7, I mean, we're addressing, of course, a particular group of countries, and I think it's a shared experience that in this group of countries, we of course also have strong elected local governments that we can speak to. But of course, we know it's most likely not the case everywhere. So what would you basically expect also in the, let's say, outreach beyond the G7 countries themselves from us as Urban 7 Secretariat and Urban 7 Group, but also, of course, from the G7 group of countries? To make it simple, I start from the left with Jonas this time and then go over. But we have to be brief because we have to finish on time. But we have quick statement.
This was hard. I think that I would expect that we scale the initiatives that are ongoing and successful. Replicate, like, for example, the Viable Cities Network, spread that kind of a story and scale those that can be replicated anywhere. Build national and regional, irregardless of where you are, policy capability to actually understand this is the goal, this is where we are, this is how far our current set of measures will take us, and this is the gap, and talk about what options do we have for the gap and who is actually responsible for what to bridge that gap. What does local leaders have to work with and local stakeholders, but what are regional and national questions that needs to be addressed? So you get the very clear distribution of responsibility. I think that's what I would expect.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, just lean into the relationships piece. So similar to those who we already have existing relationships with, or the coalitions and associations, but really leaning into those relationships, because it is just about people to people. And once we kind of build those relationships, then it's a lot easier to see momentum and movement, and you can support, like you said, you can support then those best practices to share.
Thank you. You know anything? Maybe both
Thanks.
are short.
Thanks. Very shortly, first of all, as I mentioned, integrate the work with the climate actions to the biodiversity work and the circular economy work. Take everyone on board in the local level, but not only in the local level, but extend that shared collaboration in different levels, in multi-government level, but also in a peer level, which is very, very important as well. And I think I have been having so much to my work from that kind of experiences, like in Malmö or what's doing in the rest of the, like Copenhagen. There are great examples everywhere, and hopefully be giving also some inspiration from my work that we have been doing. So yeah, and I'm always positive to see country leaders, national leaders who actually share the same ambition and take it seriously, and also want to work in multi-level cooperation, because that is so important.
So I give
Extremely important.
the last word to the upcoming presidency then.
Say this is something that is important to involve all the level about this discussion. It's something that we are not able to win alone. It is to play together with the responsibilities that must be clear, and also give the instrument to respond to this responsibility. And this is one of the main aspects that we would like to improve.
Just a short comment. I fully agree with you, Wolfgang, in terms of outreach beyond the G7, and not only G7 to the G20, and not only the government level, the around the world. We have to share this momentum or intention to share with the other countries throughout the world. At the same time, beyond the government level, we definitely need to involve stakeholders, citizens, the private sectors. In this regard, I think the local government playing a central role in developing the initiative. Thank you.
So thank you to all of my panelists, great panelists. So big hand for my panel here, please. And thank you all to the audience. And so we're looking forward, of course, to continue the collaboration with all of you and some people in the audience here as well, to make G7 work better for local governments as well. So, and to move that agenda forward. And so thank you all. Have a great day. And now we have, I think, a great opening ceremony here to follow. Okay. When are we starting? 1 o'clock, official opening of the